I have a stuffed elephant in a box in my garage that I've never given to my granddaughter. It's still in the original bag from the toy store. Pink. One ear slightly bigger than the other, which is why I'd picked it out. I thought it made it look real. Like it had lived a little. My wife Carol would have loved it. She always said the imperfect ones have more soul. Lily was 4 months old when I bought it. She's 2.5 now. I still haven't been allowed to give it to her. My son Trevor married Amanda 3 years ago in a small ceremony outside of Portland. I flew out from Columbus, pressed my good suit the night before, and sat in the second row because Amanda's family took up the first. I didn't mind. Trevor looked happy. That was enough. Amanda is smart. I noticed that early. She's the kind of person who reads the fine print on everything. Lease agreements, receipts, the back of shampoo bottles. Trevor used to joke about it. He'd say, "Dad, she's the reason we've never been overcharged for anything in our lives." He said it like it was a compliment. Maybe it was. The first sign I missed was Thanksgiving, 2 years before Lily was born. Amanda suggested, very calmly, very reasonably, that maybe we shouldn't do the big family gathering at my house anymore. Too much travel for everyone, she said. Too chaotic. She had a spreadsheet. Actual color-coded cells showing drive times, hotel costs, carbon footprint estimates. I remember staring at it thinking, this woman made a spreadsheet about Thanksgiving. I laughed it off. Trevor shrugged. We did a smaller dinner at their place instead. I flew home to an empty house and heated up a frozen lasagna and told myself this was just what modern families look like. Carol died 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 3 months from diagnosis to gone. Trevor was with me at the end. We sat on either side of her hospital bed and held her hands and didn't say much because there wasn't anything left to say that we hadn't already said. When it was over, he drove me home, sat with me for 2 days, and then flew back to Portland. After that, I threw myself into work. I was a commercial insurance adjuster for 22 years. Not glamorous, but I was good at it. I retired at 61 with a decent pension, a paid-off house in a quiet neighborhood in Columbus, and a lot of hours to fill. When Trevor called to tell me Amanda was pregnant, I cried. I'm not embarrassed to admit that. I stood in my kitchen in my socks and cried like I hadn't since the hospital. Because it was something new, something Carol would have given anything to see. I booked a flight before the call ended. Lily was born on a Tuesday in March. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Trevor sent me a photo within minutes. This red, squinting, furious-looking little person who somehow looked exactly like my son had when he was born, just smaller and louder. I flew out 4 days later. Amanda's mother was already there, staying in the guest room. That was fine. Completely fine. I got a hotel. I held Lily for about 40 minutes total over 2 days, and every second of it felt like something I'd been waiting years for without knowing I was waiting. I noticed, on that second day, that Amanda seemed tired in a way that wasn't just new mother tired. She watched me hold Lily with this careful expression I couldn't quite name, like she was cataloging something. Trevor didn't notice, or if he did, he didn't say anything. I flew home with the pink elephant still in my bag because I'd forgotten to give it to them, and I figured I'd bring it next time. There were a lot of next times that didn't happen the way I expected. The requests started small. That's the thing I want people to understand. They always start small. First, it was a heads up before visits. Reasonable. I'd call Trevor, we'd pick a weekend, I'd fly out. Fine. Then it was a 2-week notice minimum. Also fine, I thought. They have schedules. A baby is a lot. Then Amanda mentioned that it would be better if I stayed at a hotel rather than their house, even when they had the guest room. We're just trying to protect our space, Trevor told me. He said it in her words. I could tell because he talked slightly faster than normal, the way he does when he's repeating something he memorized. I said, of course, no problem. Then came the list. I don't know what I expected when Trevor called to say Amanda wanted to formalize some boundaries around visits. I think I expected something like, call before you come, don't bring sugar, we're doing screen-free time on Sunday mornings. Normal things. Things you'd say out loud to someone's face. What arrived in my email 3 days later was a PDF. 11 points. Formatted. a header with their names on it, like a legal document. I'm going to tell you a few of the highlights, because I want you to understand that I am not exaggerating any of this. Visits limited to 1 Saturday per month, maximum 3 hours. I had to submit my intended arrival time by Wednesday of that week. No gifts without prior written approval from Amanda. She would confirm or deny within 48 hours. Items from unapproved vendors. She listed specific stores that were not acceptable, would be returned. No discussion of Carol with Lily under any circumstances, no photos shared, no stories told. The reasoning given was to avoid confusing Lily about family structure during her developmental window. No mention of my retirement, finances, or any topic that could create expectations in Lily's mind about inheritance or wealth. And at the bottom, in a separate box with a border around it like it was being highlighted for emphasis, a request for a monthly family support contribution of $600 to offset the cost of childcare on the Saturdays I visited, since Amanda would need to rearrange her schedule. $600 per month. To see my granddaughter. Once. I read the whole thing twice, then I closed my laptop and went and sat on my back porch for a long time, looking at the yard Carol and I had planted together. The rose bushes she picked out that I've been maintaining badly ever since because I don't really know what I'm doing, but I can't bring myself to let them die. I thought about calling Trevor immediately. I thought about calling a lawyer. I thought about getting in my car and driving the 9 hours to Portland and standing on their front porch until someone talked to me like a human being. Instead, I went inside, made a pot of coffee, and sat with it until I knew what I actually wanted to do. I called Trevor the next morning. He picked up on the second ring, which told me he'd been waiting. Dad. He sounded like a teenager who knows they're in trouble but isn't sure how much. I asked him if he'd read the document before Amanda sent it. Long pause. I looked it over. I asked him if he thought $600 a month to see Lily was reasonable. Another pause. It's not, she frames it as. He stopped. Started again. She says it's not about the money. It's about establishing that visits have a real cost and that you're invested. I let that sit there for a moment. Then I asked him directly, do you want me in Lily's life, Trevor? Not Amanda. You. He said yes. Without hesitating. That was the only part of the conversation that didn't feel rehearsed. I told him I wasn't going to sign the document or agree to the monthly payment. I told him I understood if that created problems, and I told him I loved him, and I hung up. I sat there for a minute. Then I made another call. Her name is Patricia, and she has been my accountant for 16 years. She's also sharp in the way that quietly competent people are sharp. She notices things, remembers everything, and doesn't volunteer information unless you ask the right question. I'd done something for Trevor and Amanda 2 years earlier that I hadn't told many people. When they were buying their house in Portland, the market was ugly, and they were short on the down payment. I gave them $47,000. Not a loan, a gift. I transferred it directly, filed the proper gift tax paperwork, did everything correctly. I wanted them to have a stable home. I wanted Lily to grow up somewhere permanent. What I did not know, what I had no way to know because I trusted my son, was what happened to that money after I transferred it. I wasn't looking for anything when I called Patricia. I just wanted to think out loud with someone I trusted. I told her about the document, the $600, the whole thing. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "When did you give them the down payment money?" I told her, 22 months ago. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Do you know what their mortgage is?" I didn't. I said so. She looked it up while I was on the phone. Public record, she said, county assessor's office. The mortgage on their house was $340,000. The home sold for $390,000. The math was simple. With a $47,000 gift, they should have put down about $50,000 total, which would have covered roughly 12 to 13%. A standard mortgage on a $390,000 home at that down payment wouldn't match what the county showed. Patricia, very carefully, said, "The recorded down payment on this property is $21,000. I heard her. I didn't say anything for a moment. "That's about $26,000 less than what you gave them," she said. I asked her what that meant. She said she couldn't know for certain. She said there could be closing costs, fees, any number of things. She also said that if I wanted to understand exactly where the money went, I had options. I was the original source of the funds. I had documentation, and depending on how the transfer was structured, I might have more standing than I realized. I thanked her. I told her I'd think about it. Then I called a family law attorney I'd found the week before, just in case I needed to understand my rights as a grandparent in Oregon, because I had been doing that kind of research in the evenings. Quietly, the way I used to review claims files, methodically, without jumping to conclusions. Here's what I learned about grandparent visitation rights in Oregon. Because it matters to this story, Oregon allows grandparents to petition for visitation rights under certain circumstances. It's not automatic. It requires showing that visitation is in the best interest of the child and that denying it would harm the child's welfare. It's a high bar, and it's not guaranteed. But it exists. I also learned that a court doesn't look kindly on a parent who uses access to a child as a financial instrument. The attorney used that phrase, financial instrument. She said if I could document the pattern, the escalating restrictions, the payment demand, everything in writing, it would be relevant if things ever went that direction. I told her I had it in writing. I had the PDF. She said, keep everything. I did. I want to be clear about something because I've thought about this a lot in the months since. I did not do what I did next as revenge. I want to be careful about that word because people hear revenge and they imagine anger, and I wasn't angry in the way people expect. I was sad, mostly. And I was clear-eyed in a way that grief, strangely, had prepared me for. When Carol died, I had to make hard decisions while my heart was breaking. You get used to separating what you feel from what needs to be done. What I did next was about my son. Not about Amanda, not about the money, not about being right, about Trevor, because somewhere in that phone call, in the pause before he said yes, he wanted me in Lily's life. I heard someone who was lost, who had made choices he didn't fully understand yet and was living inside them. I knew that feeling. I'd made choices after Carol died that took me years to see clearly. I wasn't going to judge my son for being human, but I was going to help him see. I spent 2 weeks pulling everything together. The original transfer records for the $47,000, the email confirmation, the property records Patricia had found, a timeline I wrote out by hand, just for myself, of every interaction with Amanda going back 2 years, the Thanksgiving spreadsheet, the 2-week notice rule, the hotel request, the PDF. I wasn't building a legal case, I was building a picture. Then I got in my car and drove to Portland. I didn't call ahead. I know that sounds dramatic, but I want to explain my reasoning. I wasn't going there to confront Amanda. I was going to see my son. Just my son. I timed it for a Tuesday morning, when I knew from past experience that Amanda taught a yoga class from 9 to 11. Trevor works from home. He opened the door in a t-shirt and sweatpants with coffee in his hand. And the look on his face was so complicated that I still think about it. Surprise and something like relief, which told me more than he probably intended. I said, I'm not here to fight. I just need you to look at something with me. He let me in. We sat at the kitchen table and I put a folder in front of him. Not a dramatic gesture. I just set it down and let him open it himself. He went through it quietly. I watched his face the way I used to watch juries in the claim disputes I handled, looking for the moment when something landed. It took about 4 minutes. He stopped on the property record page, read it again, then looked up. Dad, what is this? It wasn't quite a question. His voice had gone flat in a particular way. I told him it was a question I couldn't answer for him, that there might be a good explanation, that I wasn't accusing anyone of anything. I was just showing him what I had found, because he had a right to know and because I thought, if the situation were reversed, if I had given him $47,000 and something didn't add up, I would want someone to show me. He looked back down at the papers. He asked me how I found this. I told him about the call with Patricia. He asked me if anyone else knew. I said no. Just me, Patricia, and now him. He sat there for a long time. I didn't try to fill the silence. Eventually, he said, very quietly. She told me some of it went toward her car loan and a few other things we needed. She said she'd handle it. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask for receipts, he said. He almost laughed when he said it, but not quite. I reached across the table and put my hand on his arm for a second. That was all. Then I stood up and told him I was going to get some coffee down the street and he should call me if he wanted to talk more. I told him I loved him and that I wasn't going anywhere, that regardless of any of this, regardless of what he decided, I would be at the end of a phone and a 9-hour drive for as long as I was alive. He nodded. He didn't look up. I went and got coffee. I sat in a window seat and watched people walk by and thought about Carol, the way I often do when things are heavy. I thought about what she would have said, probably something practical and slightly funny. She had a way of naming the absurd thing that made it smaller. I stayed 2 hours. Then I drove to my hotel and went to sleep. Trevor called me the next morning before I'd left my room. His voice was different. Not angry. Focused. The way he used to sound in high school when he'd worked through a math problem that had stumped him and came to tell me the answer. He said he'd gone through their bank statements the night before. He said there was more than he expected. He said he didn't want to get into it on the phone. I told him that was okay. I told him to take his time. He asked me if I was still in Portland. I said I was. He asked if we could meet for lunch. We met at a diner about 2 miles from his house. He was there before me, sitting in a corner booth with his hands around a glass of water. When I sat down across from him, he looked like he hadn't slept, but he was steady. He told me he'd been up all night. He told me things that I'm not going to repeat here in detail, because they're his things, his marriage, and whatever comes next is his to navigate. I'll say only that the picture he'd found was larger than what I'd shown him, and that he was looking at it clearly now, which was all I had wanted. At the end of it, he said, "Why didn't you just tell me? When you got that document, why didn't you just call me and say, 'Trevor, your wife is trying to charge me $600 a month to see my granddaughter.'" I told him I had. That first call. He got quiet. I mean, why didn't you push harder? I thought about it for a second. Then I told him the truth, because I'd learned the hard way that you can't make someone see something before they're ready. All you can do is make sure the information exists and that they trust you enough to look at it when they are. He stared at his water glass. I kept thinking if I'd just managed everything carefully enough, it would work itself out, he said. That if I kept everyone happy enough, the situation would just stabilize. I told him I understood. I told him I'd done the same thing for too long after his mother got sick, managed, and refused to name what was happening until there was nothing left to manage. He looked up at me. "I want you in Lily's life, Dad," he said. "That's not going to change." I told him I knew. We sat there a while longer. We ordered food neither of us ate much of. At some point, we started talking about other things. His work, a hiking trail he'd been meaning to try, whether the Bengals had any shot this year. Small things, real things, the kind of things that mean you're still connected underneath the hard stuff. When we walked out to the parking lot, he hugged me, long enough to mean something. I drove home to Columbus that afternoon. 9 hours. I put on a playlist Carol made years ago that I still have on my phone, and I drove through the mountains and into the flat middle of the country as the sun went down. That was 5 months ago. Trevor and Amanda are separated. He moved into an apartment in January. I don't know all the details, and I'm not going to pretend I do. I know he has a lawyer. I know the situation with the finances is being looked at by people who understand it better than I do. I know he has Lily every other weekend, and on Wednesdays, and I know that last month I flew to Portland and spent a Saturday with both of them at a park near his apartment. I brought the pink elephant. Lily took one look at it, grabbed it by the ear, the bigger, slightly lopsided ear, and ran across the grass with it like she'd owned it her whole life. Trevor watched her and shook his head slowly. "She's Carol," he said. I didn't trust my voice right away, so I just nodded. We sat on a bench and watched her run. This small, furious person who looked like my son and moved like my wife. And I thought, this is what I was protecting. Not some principle, not my ego, not even my money. Just this. I'm telling this story because there's a comment I keep seeing on videos like this one, and I've been watching them. I'll admit it, because apparently I'm not alone in any of this. The comment always says, some version of, just walk away. It's not worth it. Protect your peace. And I understand the instinct. I do. But I want to offer something different. For anyone sitting where I was sitting 8 months ago with a PDF full of rules on their laptop screen. Don't fight in anger. Don't beg. Don't make ultimatums in the heat of the moment. But don't disappear either. Get quiet. Get organized. Get clear on what you know, what you can prove, and what the law says in your state. Then, when the time is right and you have something real to offer, give it to the person who actually needs to see it. Sometimes the best thing you can do for the people you love is make sure they have the whole picture, and then get out of the way while they decide what to do with it. That's what the folder was. Not revenge, a whole picture. Carol would have handled it differently. She would have been braver and faster and probably would have said something perfectly calibrated in the first 5 minutes that cut right to the center of the thing. She always knew the right word. I just knew how to wait and how to document and how to love my son without needing him to love me back in exactly the right way. Turns out that was enough. If you found yourself in something like this, document everything. Learn your rights. And if you'd like to share your story in the comments, I read every single one. You're not alone in this, and you're not crazy for feeling what you feel. This was my story. Thanks for being here with me for it. I've been sitting with this story for 5 months now, and the thing that stays with me isn't the folder, or the property records, or even the conversation at the diner. It's the pink elephant. The one with the lopsided ear that I carried in a bag for 2.5 years because I wasn't allowed to give it to a 2-year-old who didn't even know I existed in the way I wanted to exist for her. That's what control costs. Not just the person it's aimed at, it costs the child too. Lily didn't know she was being kept at arm's length from her grandfather. She just knew a stranger handed her a stuffed animal at a park one Saturday, and she ran with it like she'd always owned it. Kids don't know what they're missing until later. Sometimes much later, and by then the years are just gone. I'm not interested in casting Amanda as a villain, even now. What I've come to believe, and this took me a while to get to, is that people who need to control the people around them are usually operating from fear. Fear of losing something, fear of not being enough, fear that love is a finite resource that has to be rationed and managed. I don't know what Amanda feared. That's not mine to know, but I recognize the pattern, because I'd seen it in claim disputes for 22 years. When someone starts building walls and charging tolls, they're usually protecting something they know is already compromised. What I didn't do, and what I think matters, is respond to fear with fear. I didn't threaten. I didn't demand. I didn't put Trevor in a position where he had to choose sides in the middle of a fight. I waited until I had something real, something true, something he could hold in his hands and evaluate for himself. And then I gave it to him and stepped back. That's not patience in the passive sense. It's patience with a purpose. There's a difference between waiting because you don't know what to do and waiting because you understand that the right moment hasn't arrived yet. Carol taught me that, actually, not through advice but through watching how she handled hard things. She never rushed toward a difficult conversation before she was ready. She'd sit with something, turn it over, let it settle. Then she'd say exactly what needed to be said. I think about Trevor a lot. About the man he was before all this and the man he's becoming now, on the other side of it. He told me recently that the hardest part wasn't finding out about the money. It was realizing how long he'd been managing everyone's feelings instead of trusting his own judgment. That's a thing that happens to good people. They confuse keeping the peace with telling the truth. They're not the same thing, and the gap between them has a cost that compounds over time. Lily ran across that park with the elephant like she owned the whole world. Watching her, I thought, this is what it looks like when someone hasn't been taught yet to make themselves small. She hasn't learned to manage. She just runs. I want to stay that connected to something, to a reason that's bigger than being right. That's the only thing I'd tell anyone who's sitting where I was sitting last year, reading a PDF that reduced their love for a grandchild into a subscription service. Don't let them make you small. Get clear. Get quiet. Get organized. And hold on to the reason you're fighting, not the fight itself. Lily has the elephant. I have my Saturdays back. Trevor is finding his footing. Some things take longer than they should. That doesn't mean they're lost.